What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Easy Convo. I'm Zaid. I'm here with my co-host Emmanuel Bird. Today, we're sitting down with former professional cyclists who has competed at some of the biggest levels of the sport around the world.
Our guest today, Mr. Alex Hoehn, is a U23 national champion, a USA national team member through 2018 and 2020, a rider who has stood the test of time in some of the biggest stages, like Zeta said, across the world. Now, Alex, I'll be honest with you, I'm reading off the prompter right now, if you can't tell. So I'm trying to run your resume as perfect as I can, but I
Yeah,
have to
good.
ask, have you ever fell off your bike before?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, man. One of the first times I took the hardest fall of my life, I was in Taiwan racing the seven day tour of Taiwan, and I was 17 at the time. I rose through the ranks pretty quickly, signed to a pro team, and then they just flew me straight to Taiwan. I didn't know what I was doing. We were racing against 170 people, and I was coming hot around a corner, and I was following one of my buddies who took the corner really well. I didn't really know what I was doing. Slid out, flew over the curb and onto the other side of the street. And that just started the race off, on a great note. And from that point on, for the next 7 days, I crashed probably three more times. You know, more just like road rash, a little bit of like sprained wrist here and there. But yeah, yeah, definitely hit the pavement.
As far as
I
sport.
had, I had to ask you, but like I said, a very lengthy resume, and I'll continue with it for you. He's claimed first place overall in the Tour of Gila. Wrote, he rode in the King of the Mountain the King of the Mountain. He wore the King of the Mountain jersey. My apologies. In the Imogen Tour in California, and did the Tour of France as well, and the Tour of Rwanda.
So
Now,
I'll just pause you there. I didn't compete in the Tour de France. I want to make that very clear. If someone
okay,
here
my
is
apologies.
listening, no, it's totally cool. But I definitely do not want to take credit for that race. That was one of the races I did not do. However, the Amgen Tour of California is a world tour race like the Tour de France. So very very competitive in that same way.
Okay, well, we see the journey here speaks for itself, and you've been a part of a lot of highly competitive races, and obviously we're off to a great start right now, but we hope that this next 45 to an hour is an easy conversation for you, brother.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Alex, appreciate having you on, man. Uh, to start off, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? Where you're from and kind of what you're about.
Yeah, so grew up in Lenexa, Kansas, born and raised, so just a little bit away from Zaid. And if I was, 8 years younger, Zayd and I probably would have been really good friends since we grew up in the same area. Grew up in Lenexa, played hockey for about 15 years, and then just got into cycling through my dad. He was a big cyclist back in the day. Uh, didn't do any pro cycling, but was obviously super competitive and loved it himself. And so I got to know cycling through him. And after high school, I took a pretty big stab at it and found out that I had the ability to continue in the sport and took it from there. And from that point forward, started what turned into almost a decade-long career in one of the hardest sports in the world, in my opinion. But I'm biased, so
And I have to ask this not only for the viewers, but for myself as well, Alex. Could you explain kind of what a cycling race looks like and what the sport entails in its entirety?
yeah, so I'll keep it brief. There's a couple different types of racing. There's stage racing, which was my specialty, anywhere from 7 to 10 days, all the way to 21 days in the Tour de France, to 1 day races, which is just really tough, 150, 130 mile races, just a 1 day like world championship. So a 1 day world championship race is just about, 130, 150, ton of climbing, really hard. And then the stage racing is, 8 to 10 days, anywhere from 60 miles to 100 miles every day. And then you obviously have time trialing in there. And that's where a lot of people like to be, pointing at the cyclist. Oh, he's got the alien helmet on. We're down like this and we have that really aero helmet like that. Yeah, that's what most people think of when they hear time trialing. So to be short, that's the three main categories of cycling.
So this definitely isn't like the 40-year-old woman we see in our neighborhood just cruising on the bike. This is some serious cycling here.
Yes, sir. Yeah, this is kind of depending on how hard you want to take it. It can be anywhere from the 40-year-old cyclist in the neighborhood all the way to, living, breathing, eating, sleeping, crashing, cycling. And that's kind of, the extent that I took to the sport.
Very cool. And Alex, I kind of want to circle back to when you first started cycling, kind of how you said your dad was used to cycle. Did he say he was at the pro level or?
Nope, he was at the amateur level, really high amateur level. It goes from the levels go from Cat 5 to Cat 1 and then pro. My dad was a really strong Cat 2, but he was doing schooling and work at the time, so and he had three kids, so he wasn't, he didn't have the free time to pursue that. And I went from a Cat 5 to a Cat 2, so kind of jumped pretty quickly in Kansas. The level in Kansas is nothing special, and so no one really thought I had the ability to make it to the pro ranks. And I just, used that as fuel to the fire to prove everyone wrong. And the following season went from a Cat 2 and signed to my first pro team, Elevate KHS, the fall of 2016.
Very cool. And so when you first started training from that transition from hockey to cycling, kind of what did it look like? Were you taking it serious? Was it more just trying things out, or kind of walk us through your training at the start of your hockey? My apologies, cycling career.
Yeah, no worries. So it definitely progressed, just like everything, just like you playing basketball. You can't start off training 30 hours a week. And boy, I did not. Your body can't handle that load, it can't handle that fatigue resistance. So starting off, I was doing 12 to 15 hours on the bike, maybe mixed in with some hockey in the winter or some weight training in the spring, also in the winter. And then as the years went on and on, I just started to add the hours and you just build this base. And so within the next 3 to 4 years, I was, you know, right at about 800 to 1,000 hours a year on the bike and kept that up for the next 8, 9 years. And that's kind of where, at least in training volume wise, that's kind of where it peaked for me.
You speak on the constant growth in your training regimen throughout the years and things like that. What was the like the food intake and your recovery and things like that? How did that begin to progress as you went on and on?
So, yeah, it's crazy. Great question. So as a pro cyclist or a very high amateur cyclist, at any given day, if you're in a training block 2, 3, 4 weeks long, you're burning, I don't know, anywhere from 2 to 5,000 calories a day. And so to put it in layman terms and to help people understand just the sheer volume of calories I'm consuming, I like to put it in how many pizzas I could eat in a day. And pretty much like three medium-sized pepperoni Domino's pizzas is what I would have to eat in one day just to stay at a calorie, just to be not in the deficit, just to break even on the amount of calories burned. So, that was kind of my regimen day in and day out in big training blocks was, 6 to 8,000 calories of food eaten in all sorts of, quantities. It wasn't just pizza, it was rice, chicken, pasta, simple carbs, stuff like that. So, the eating off the bike is just as important as eating on the bike. You would find yourself eating, oh my goodness, I would have 5 bananas, a couple bags of Sour Patch Kids, some Snicker bars, and a couple Cokes, like halfway through a big ride. So you definitely need to fuel on the bike as you do off the bike.
For sure. And Alex, so kind of walk us through kind of like the moment. So you climb through the amateur ranks pretty fast, faster than most people would, it sounds like. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, I would say.
And then I guess kind of what was the moment or race that you're like, okay, I'm not an amateur anymore. I'm a pro level cyclist. I don't know. You got a certain time, or can you kind of walk us through the kind of that moment when you made that transition from amateur to pro?
Yeah, so it was the summer of 2016, and it's a race that I would become very familiar with in the years coming. But Tour of the Gila back in 2016, I actually raced it as an amateur, and it was a 5-day stage race with over 8,000 feet of climbing, 10,000 feet of climbing every day, and I was able to just sustain mass quantities of fatigue day in and day out and day in and day out. And that is more of an indicator than max power or peak 20-minute power for becoming a professional cyclist. Can you do your peak power 5 hours into a race? Can you continue your watt per kilo at a constant rate as you fatigue? And so my coaches were able to look at my power and look at all my data that I had accumulated throughout that week. And he was like, okay, you need to get in touch with this team. These are crazy power numbers. You're gonna go. You need to go pro. And so it was at that moment that I was, super excited. I kind of just had made my dream come true in, again, like I said, what would turn into become a very lengthy career in cycling, that had a lot of ups and downs throughout my career.
Yeah, Alex, cycling sounds like a very physically demanding sport as you continue to tell stories and explain the growth that comes with it. Can you explain to us kind of that those mental blocks you continue to go through while you're cycling and how you're able to strengthen yourself? What's more of the mental side of cycling? If you could explain that.
Yeah, so cycling is they say it's more mental than physical, and that's very true at the highest levels, because everyone can train hard. Everyone is talented. We're all really good at the top. No one's slacking off. No one is doing things they shouldn't. So you're finding these 1 to 2% differences that can put you slightly above your competition in order to win. And that's all you can reach for at the very top of a level. Think of it as a pyramid. As you get better and better and better, the margins are so much smaller in order to become better. So one of the biggest things in the sport is, okay, can you just mentally get through this tough exercise? Can you mentally stay strong? I've had races where it's dumping rain, 40 degrees, soaking rain. It's nasty. Everyone's complaining. Everyone's having a terrible time. A lot of people are dropping out. And I'm just here, level headed, telling my teammates, guys, everyone is suffering. If you can just turn your brain on and think about positive thoughts and get through this race, you're gonna win. You're gonna be better off than 90% of the people in this race. And oftentimes that was the make or break difference in being a champion, winning a race, and not.
Cool. And to follow up on that, so when you made that switch from amateur to pro, um, do you feel like the level that you're training at to put yourself in those type of situations, to be comfortable in those type of situations, do you feel like once you turn pro, the training really, you really took the training to the next level?
Absolutely. I got way more serious in my off-season training, way more serious in my in-season training. My diet was way more strict. Everything kind of just took a notch up. And I could see myself progressing through the years, but in order to do that, I had to go from 15-hour weeks to 20-hour weeks to, nearing 5, 6 years into my career up to 30-hour weeks, just to take those next steps in order to, eventually win the races that I was able to win.
You mentioned in 2016 is really when you made that transition from amateur to professional. And then in 2018, you were an invitation and a member of the Team USA national team. What was that feeling like when you received that invitation? Were you kind of relieved, like all this work is paid off, or were you like, there's so much more to get done?
Kind of both. You have to soak in. You have to celebrate these moments in cycling, like in a lot of other sports. The celebrations, the ups are so few and far between that you have to just take a second and really let it soak in, and just understand what you just achieved. You won the national championships. You get an invitation to race at the world championships. with the best guys in the world on the USA national team. And so it's definitely, something that I was very excited and happy about. But at the same time, it was basically just opening up another door to get to another closed door. I was like, okay, I've made it here. Let's go. Let's keep pushing. Let's get to the next obstacle. And that's kind of how my mentality was throughout my entire
Very cool. So, Alex, I kind of you've been to a lot of countries, haven't you?
career. Yes, sir.
Do you have a specific number or range of countries you've been to before we get into it?
Oh man, I would say at over 30, under 50.
Okay.
Somewhere around there.
Slight flex. Slight flex.
Yeah, five continents, been to Africa, Asia, South America, North America, uh, Europe, obviously living there for a while that we'll get to. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's, kind of the range.
What was
Perfect.
what was it like, Alex, being exposed to so many different countries, different cultures, and things like that? Being just from, you know, Lenexa, Kansas, compared to the Africas, the Asia, things like that.
It was quite a culture shock. I'm not gonna lie. Coming from Kansas and then getting the opportunities to race all over the world with my team, the one thing I would say that it did for me was to just broaden my perspective in life. Going into conversations, not just my way or the highway, being open to differences, being open to different ways of working as a team. I had teammates from all over the world, from Russia, from Ireland to Mexico, everywhere, and everyone has their own unique way of training, of eating, of living, and that goes with all of the other countries that I've visited with as well. You see so much variety, and you just learn to appreciate where you come from. Us being from America, and then when I visited Africa, just you know you thank God every day, being blessed to live in a country like America, going overseas into third world countries, living in third world countries. You definitely have a different perspective on life coming back.
Very cool. So I kind of want to touch on, you're obviously traveling. Sounds like you were traveling a lot while you were cycling. Kind of walk us through what this was like to constantly be on a plane, being in new countries, and then from there, I kind of want you to talk about some specific countries and moments in those countries, if you kind of do that for us.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing right off the bat, I'll go to anyone listening: buy an eye mask. Wherever you go, no matter where you travel, buy an eye mask. It doesn't have to be $100. It can be a $10 Amazon one. Life changer. You'll never sleep without it. Just have to say that because through all my years of traveling, I was on the road, sleeping on buses, sleeping on trains, sleeping on airplanes, trying to just get those marginal gains, like I talked about. Getting just those every little bit of gains that you can get. How do you get them? The eye mask is really helpful. So that's on that travel. And then, like I mentioned before, I lived in Spain and Turkey for off and on for a couple years, and having to just adjust your sleep schedule with the time zones, packing your bags and unpacking your bags, living out of a suitcase pretty much for 8 to 10 months out of the year. It is a massive grind and more again of the mental block than anything. You find yourself just, oh, okay, fine. Another 8 hour bus ride, another 3 hour plane ride. Okay, here we go, here we go. And things to do while you're in those transitioning periods: read books, listen to podcasts, just like the TheEZConvo. Make sure you're talking to your family back home. Overseas, you're 9, 10, 12 hours different in time change. So get a schedule to talk to your family back home because it gets lonely over there for sure.
I want to ask, how are you able to, you mentioned living on, or some nights having to sleep on a bus, sleeping on the road and things like that, in and out of a suitcase. How are you able to sustain the constant hunger that you had towards cycling when some nights it could feel like all bets are off. Like, man, this is difficult.
Oh man, I had many of those nights, and my dad and parents both took a lot of those conversations. I was in dark places over there, over in Spain, over in Europe, not sure if I was going to make it, to the next day, just because I got sick really bad a few years back. Um, so just knowing how to mentally prepare for all those tough times makes it easier. If you go into it with the mindset of, oh man, if I get sick, I'm just going to go back home, you're never going to make it. You have to have an obsessive mindset in that particular time, place and time, to go after what you want and accomplish what you want. And I think there's a time and place for everything. There's a time and place for full gas. There's a time and place for, going out with your buddies. And if you can manage when those times are, give yourself something to look forward to, then you can absolutely have a long career in the sport. And being able to keep the hunger, how I was able to keep the hunger was knowing that I wasn't done getting better. I always knew I had, more to give and more to give. And that was probably one of the biggest reasons I could keep going, was just my own fuel to just prove the haters wrong, prove everyone wrong that never thought I could make it. And, that's, a lot of what led me to all my success.
That's inspirational, man. You got me wanting to go to the gym right now, bro.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work out right now, man. That's real.
No, definitely give you your flowers on that. Um, I kind of want to get into some more about some of the countries, and because we were talking about earlier, you said you rode in the Swiss Alps. I remember you told me a story about how in Africa you had to get certain shots and before you went, so you didn't get sick and you're sleeping in mosquito covered tents or
Exactly.
whatever.
Yeah.
Can you kind of walk us through some, I don't know, cool stories or memorable moments in different countries you traveled to kind of let the audience know?
Absolutely. So we'll start off with my South Korea story. This was crazy. One of the biggest small little scares I've had in my life. It was over the COVID year, so we were obviously through COVID. I think it was 2021 now, but still pretty fresh. I'm flying from, I think, Eastern Europe into South Korea, layover there into Malaysia, something like that. I'm not sure the travel pattern. And this story is not too crazy. It's short, but we get off in South Korea. I get into the airplane or off the airplane into the airport, and I'm walking through the airport. They have these guards in full suits, like full on white mask suit. You can't see any part of them. They're scared. Everyone's like being all protective. And there's these heat radars above your head that you have to walk through in case, in case you're sick. And if you're sick, you get detained. And if you get detained, I don't know. I don't know what happens. I never did want to know what happens. However, I walked through those heat detectors, and I got pulled to the side. And I was like, oh boy. And I wasn't feeling good before that. I definitely was a little sick, but I wasn't going to let anyone know because I didn't want to like have to get detained in South Korea or something. So they pulled me aside, and I'm just sweating bullets. And 5, 10 minutes pass. They're talking to each other in Korean, and I'm over here just looking at my director like, what the heck's going on? And eventually everything was all good. They let me go. They said, hey, your temperature's a little high, but we're gonna let you go. And I got through. So that was fun. To Zaid's point, the African story. Oh my goodness. We flew from Turkey into Africa on a small little prop plane, and we get there, they don't have our bikes. These small little planes don't have enough room for, there's like 200 people that need to bring bikes into Rwanda all at once. Our race starts 3 days later. We're there at the hotel, no bikes. And for cyclists and athletes that are trying to stay warm and ready for the race, what do you do? And so my team and I, we went on jogs. We did little hit circuits in our hotel rooms. and just crazy things that you couldn't imagine just to stay warm and ready for the race. And on top of that, we had to get malaria shots because you're going into Africa. They want to make sure that you don't get, bit by mosquitoes and have to go to the hospital and all that protocol. So we were, spraying 100% deep mosquito spray on us. We were living under mosquito tents for 2 weeks. I was down there for 2 weeks. The race was 8 days. We were there for like a few days before and a few days after. And I was in undergrad at the time and talking to my dad on the phone. And I'm just like, Dad, I'm doing my final project 2 days before the tour of Rwanda in a mosquito net. This is crazy. Like it's things that you could not even just dream up of. You wouldn't even think about going to Africa and living under a mosquito net for 10 days. It was crazy. And then while during the race, so we finally got to the race. During the race, my director, he's this Aussie guy. He goes, "Oi, look in the trees. Look up there, mates." And we're like, "What's going on up there?" We're seeing monkeys swinging in the trees, man, all around us up this massive, beautiful mountain pass in Africa. It blew me away. So, that was crazy.
The stories sound like they're endless, Alex. Do you have a particular country that was your favorite, like the one that you traveled to, or maybe you even lived in for a little bit that was your favorite?
I definitely spent the most time in Spain as I lived there for a full year on a pro Spanish team. I think the prettiest country that I went to was Austria. If you've seen The Sound of Music or if you know what that is, it's just these green, luscious fields, and it looks fake. And then you go to Austria, Salzburg, and you're like, oh, that's not fake. It's like your eyes see lush green, lush blue. So we that was where the world championships were, and so we stayed about a week in Austria, and the food, the people, the culture, it was top, top place I've ever been to.
It almost was like you were kind of having a little sightseeing while you were there too, just on your bike ride since there's such long you're going such a far distance. You're going to
You
see all
know,
these countries you go to.
everyone asks me, they're always like, Alex, did you get to go do any touristy things? And not really. You think I did, but I did get to see a lot via the bike. However, when we were racing, all I was seeing was the wheel in front of me for the next 10 days. And so it's really hard to take in all of the pretty mountains and views that I did get to ride through. But I always say that I went on coffee tours. Coffee's a big cult, it's a big cycling thing. And everywhere we go, we love to go to coffee shops here and here in France, in Italy. And so I definitely toured a lot of coffee shops. So I did some touristy things.
Very cool. Now it's kind of so I know there's a lot of different. Can you kind of educate us and educate the audience when you're in a race, kind of how it sounds like it's more of a team sport than a lot of people think. Like personally, I thought, you're just going out there and you're just cycling as fast as you can and, trying to be the first person to the finish line. But there's so much more to it, it sounds like, from
Quite a
our
lot.
conversations we've had. Kind of just educate us on how you talked about, the distance and kind of the different time periods that you're racing in. Kind of educate us what's it like while you're on that bike, and kind of the what's the word here? Game plan as a team, and I'm kind of interested too. How does the bathroom and food situation work?
Oh, don't go there, bro. No. Okay, great questions. Love it. So I'll just break through what like a stage race looks like from day to day, hour to hour. You start off with what's called the peloton, and I was telling Zayd that that's just all 180 of us riding together, inches apart from each other at very high speeds. So you have to always be on. You have to be knowing where the wheel in front of you is, where the handlebars next to you are. And so it can definitely, that's what causes these mass pileups that you see, these viral clips of the Tour de France where 70 guys are coming to the finish line and just, and then everyone crashes. Well, someone overlapped a wheel and took everyone out. And that just is part of the sport, I guess. So you start out with pelotons, and then you have basically guys trying to get up the road, what's called the breakaway. So you get in the breakaway, and then you have kind of two groups on the road at the same time. You have the breakaway that's like 3 to 5 minutes up the road, and then you have the peloton. And usually the people in the peloton are getting the most rest because there's what's called getting draft behind guys. So if you're lined up behind riders, they're blocking the wind from you, and these gains can be upwards of 80 to 90% energy savings. It's outrageous. So if you're pushing, this will make sense, but these wattages, if you're pushing 350 watts on the front, and that's going really, really hard, your heart rate's probably 160, 165. If I'm 5 people behind you, I'm probably doing 180. So
Wow.
just see that drop in power and those energy savings. It's outrageous. So very advantageous.
So to start off, I'm just going to try to summarize what you just said. You start the race in a peloton, a huge group of people, right? This is where everyone start off, and then you're going to have a couple teammates from your team that kind of take off in this. Did you say it's the passway? Is that correct?
The breakaway. They're going
The
to meet up
breakaway.
in
My bad. My apologies. The breakaway, and this is when you have because how many members are on your team in these races? Like
uh,
7 people.
yeah, depends on the race, but 7 to 9 typically.
Okay, so you have you're going to have a couple people take off in this section, push a lot of watts, and get ahead. Then you have about that's probably how many what is that range? You said it's like 3 people that
Yeah,
take up
in the
that
breakaway,
take off that take off in the breakaway.
it can be anywhere, depending on the day, it can be anywhere from 3 to 10-ish is kind of a normal amount because you want to make sure the peloton can catch that breakaway. If there's too many
Yeah.
guys in the if there's too many guys in the breakaway, this becomes the peloton, and then the guys back here are out of luck.
Okay, so that makes sense. So they take off in the breakaway, and then you have a group of your team still in the peloton.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty much
and
protecting,
then what
say, me or the main GC rider.
makes sense? And then what's next from there?
So then you kind of just settle in. Then you kind of just go with the flow. You're riding, you have to kill 100, miles. So right when the breakaway goes, a lot of times, and that can take an hour. So it's really violent to get the breakaway up the road because everyone wants to be in it because you have a chance to win the race. Not a big chance, but you get TV time. Sponsors love it. Your directors love it. Everyone loves it. So being in the breakaway has its own advantages, but you're more likely not going to win the race. Anyway, that happens, and then most of the time, everyone will either pull off on the side of the road and pee or go back and get bottles, refuel for the next few hours. And so, like I mentioned earlier, the eating is just astronomical. You're slamming, 8 gels with about 20 to 30 grams of carbs per gel each race, on top of protein, not protein bars per se, but just bars, hard fuel, and then carbs in your drinks. So you're always taking in some sort of calories. And there's this fun thing called the sticky bottle. You go back into the cars. So you have the Peloton and then like 15 cars behind you. Your team car's back there. So if you get a flat, if you crash, you have spare bikes on the roof. So then you can call your team on the radio, hey, got a flat, something like that. And so one of us will go back to the car and we'll load water bottles. Just take them, dump them in our front of our shirt, dump them in the back pockets, and we'll just be like, our jerseys will just stretch out to here. And because we got to fuel 7 guys, right? So we got to bring 7 to 10 bottles at least. And the last bottle you take from the car, you grab like this. The driver out the window gives you a bottle, and he just floors it. And so you're going 40, 50 miles an hour, hanging on for dear life, and then at the last second they just give you a nice push and you go and you just get sent to the front of the peloton, and that's kind of how you get back to the main group after dropping way back to go get fuel. So that's kind of
That's
how it
pretty
works.
cool, Bob.
It's pretty sweet. So
Alex,
well,
to continue into I would say the educational part of the sport. We talked about a little bit earlier before the pod. Um, You wore the King of the Mountain jersey a lot, it sounds like. Could you explain kind of what that role and position looks like within a race and then how you assume that position for your team?
Yeah, so essentially it's whoever, at the end of the day, it sounds harsh, but it's whoever can climb the best on your team. And, I may not get the King of the Mountain jersey all the time because you have to get points that accumulate throughout the week to get the King of the Mountain jersey. I, most of the time, would be going after the GC or the overall classification, which would be the yellow jersey, like most of you guys would know watching the Tour de France, right? So you get the King of the Mountain jersey by accumulating points throughout the week, and those guys go in the breakaway. They're just trying to get up the road, get over the mountain first, and get points. Whereas I would probably try to be saving energy, staying conservative in the peloton, waiting for the final penultimate climb to just attack and try to win the race. So that's kind of how the King of the Mountain jersey varies from the overall classification competition.
To sum up to anyone listening right now, if you're wearing the King of the Mountain jersey, you're LeBron James of the sport. That's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like to me. You are Bron.
All right, more or less.
To circle back to kind of what we were talking about with the race. So you're in the breakaway happens, and then there's gonna be is that when there's a long stretch after the breakaway, is that correct?
Yeah, just a long, waiting period for the time to pass to try to,
Because do you
get.
catch up from the peloton? Do you catch up to those people that took off in that breakaway period?
Yeah, for sure. Because the peloton has, a lot more guys rotating on and off the front to pull
Hmm.
back the breakaway of like six guys. So, 30 guys are stronger than six guys, right? Just simple math that way. So usually, if timed right, they can pull the breakaway back, and then the sprinters will win the race or the climbers will win the race, depending on what the terrain looks like on the day.
That makes sense. So you're gonna group back up with your team, go for a long period, and then is the climb usually the final part of the race or the sprint at the end? That's when you guys someone takes off again from the group.
Yeah, that's when the race will get really hard. People will more attacks happen because guys will then try to get up the road again, and those don't usually happen because the peloton's moving at such a speed that it doesn't allow guys to break away from the peloton and go up the road. That's really hard to do. So at that point, you kind of just hang on for dear life and get to the bottom of the climb in the best position that you can, and then 10-kilometer climb, just full gas.
Makes sense. And then so you said a lot of these races are 8 to 10 day races, correct?
Yeah.
So how does it work when they finish? So how far do you race per day? And then do you just stay at a close hotel? Then you guys all start up at the same spot again, and then like the
Yeah.
times from the day before kind of keep adding on, or how does that work?
Yeah, so think about it like golf. I like to tell people the lowest score wins, right? The lowest time wins. So if on the first stage, if I get up the road and win the stage, and 5 minutes later the peloton comes, and so now I'm 5 minutes ahead, we start the next day in a hotel. We go to the hotel. We start the next day in that same order. So now I start with everyone, but I got 5 minutes on everyone else. And then let's say my legs crap out on the final climb and I lose 4 minutes to the peloton. So now just do the math, do the difference, and now I'm only 1 minute ahead. And so you kind of just keep score like that day in, day out, day in, day out, all the way to the finish. And then whoever has the lowest accumulated time wins the overall.
Makes sense.
About as simple as I could put it, probably.
Yeah.
So it's
Alex,
almost
how?
a 4 part race.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, that makes
there's
sense.
races inside the race, 100%.
And I've been wondering this, Alex, to not to go completely off of topic here, but if being a cyclist, it's a very, very unique sport from the way you've described it and the little bit of research I've done personally looking into it before the conversation. If you were to give us like some pros and cons or someone aspiring to get into cycling, how would you kind of sell the sport itself?
I would say it's one of the best as far as injury prevention. I guess that's when you're older, something that you can do forever. Cycling is something you can do forever. You never have to stop. You can always do it. But for kids getting into the sport, I say follow your dream and go for it. If that's something you want to do, absolutely pursue it to the best of your abilities. Now, however, don't make that everything and your whole life, because pro cycling, amateur cycling, it'll end a lot sooner than you realize. I didn't think I was going to be out of the sport at 25, 26 years old. I thought I had 8 more years in me. And while I do physically, that's just not where the Lord has led me. That's just not my plan in life and where I'm meant to be. So always have something going on outside of sports. I think, be all in sports like I was, like Zaid was, I'm sure like you were, Emmanuel. Be all in on it. Be passionate. Be obsessive over it. But make sure that's not the only thing you got going in life. Because when you do, if that's the only thing you have going, you get to my age and things become stressful. You're not putting yourself in the best position. Maybe you haven't gone through school. Maybe you don't have another skill set to kind of further your career, because cycling and sports alike is not the end all be all unless you're LeBron James or Steph Curry. So, from an honest answer, from someone that made it to the professional ranks, raced with guys who compete in the Tour de France, have friends that go to the Olympics, you need to be honest with yourself at some point. And so make sure you just have something to pivot to. And I think that's probably, some of the best advice I can give for folks coming into the sport.
That's good. That's good stuff. So you were doing your you were in college still. You're just doing a little slowed down pace while you're doing all this cycling stuff, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Very cool. And
Yeah.
where did
So
you go to? Where did you go to school? Were you in? You were in undergrad at Boulder, Colorado, Colorado
no,
Boulder, and then you
so
transitioned.
that was my graduate degree. That was for
Or
my
under-
MBA. I
Okay,
started out going to online school at Park University. They have a great online program. So anyone listening that wants to do, be in the military, have travel, wants to do online schooling all over the world, even in Africa under a mosquito tin. Park University is a wonderful school, and they supported me through my whole 5.5 years of undergrad. That's about how long it took me to do it. And
nice.
then from then I moved to Spain and had a year over there with no school, so that was nice. Figuring out what I want to do with my life, and that's a whole story in and of itself. But then went from there to Boulder and applied for my MBA and did my MBA while still racing as my last year as a pro last year in Greece, in Italy, France, and so was kind of able to just end when I wanted to end. And I think that's some advice that I could give to people listening and watching to this podcast is if you can go out on your own terms, that means you're ready for something else. And I was able to do that. And we could have a separate conversation of simply how mentally devastating it is from transitioning to a full-time career professional athlete into what the heck do I do? And so I think if you definitely, like I said, if you had something looking forward, something to look forward to, that's a real step up in moving forward.
For sure. And I commend you for being able to balance school and compete at a pro level. That's very impressive. Kind of,
I
can
did,
you? So when you look, sorry, you can
no,
go real
sorry,
fast. My
go
apologies.
ahead.
So when you look back on your career, and I kind of want to touch more of your transition into retirement, how you kind of came into deciding it's time to, hang it up. When you look back on your career, what would you say were like some of the highest highs you had? Was it like simple things of just being with the guys all the time, or was there like a certain race, like, you know what, that was like the high point of my career?
Just going
I,
out to
I,
eat.
I Dude, just hanging, honestly, just kicking it with the boys in a hotel in Africa, kicking it with the boys in Eastern Europe, waking up in Croatia, looking over the mountains and thinking to myself, wow, I'm so blessed to be here. I want to soak in every moment of this because in a blink of an eye, it's going to be over. And look at me now, it's over. It didn't last forever. So absolutely cherish those moments. Another moment, obviously, was my national championship win. I've got a cool picture. My dad's there, literally arms wide open. As I'm crossing the finish line, I just go straight to him on the bike, giving him a big hug. You know, there's not much that can top that. And to have my dad, who supported me, probably more than anyone. Obviously, my whole family was, played a big role in my success. My dad was obviously there. He flew to everywhere for me to watch, all the races. And to have him there winning that moment was one of the most memorable moments of my life. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
sure, sure.
I want to kind of touch back on what Zaid was just mentioning in your transition and things like that. How has that transition been for you since you've been removed from the sport or retired from the sport of cycling, and what's life looking like for you now?
I definitely have struggled quite a lot with stopping my career, full 180 shift into even more school. It's not something that I wanted to do. It took a long time to be okay with not waking up and riding 5 hours. It took me a long time to be okay with not hopping on a plane to Europe next week and getting my butt kicked by, other Europeans all over the world. It almost felt like you lose a part of yourself when you have a career that spans nearly a decade with, I didn't do anything else with my life. I was very, and this is maybe not the best way to do it, but this is just how I did it. I was very cut and dry. I woke up, I rode, I did school, I went to sleep. I didn't have many friends. I never went out. I never drank. None of it. And so it was a very rigid lifestyle that I learned to just love. And once I switched full on to my MBA and then now to law school, it took a minute for sure. And I think probably the biggest factor that helped me be okay is to just really, really lean into my faith. I definitely had moments where I wanted to just give up and not do anything and not work and just be lazy. And I always just got up, got in my Bible, read for the morning, got some great scripture all throughout, and really just pushed into that, leaned into my family, and was able to come out of that downward spiral of depression. Something like that puts you in massive depression. And I was able to handle it a lot better than a lot of my colleagues, some of whom got into drugs. They just became potheads or even worse drugs than people do. And I think having something, like I said, having something to look forward to. And for me, that was law school. I really love helping people. I want to make a change in other people's lives. And I asked myself, what's the best way I could do that? And that was law school. And so I am now a current 1L at Washburn University with Zaid, our co-host here, and having something to again fully put my the pedal to the metal into has kept myself busy and kept myself on, goals for the future. And Zaid and I have talked about it. Zaid being a very high level collegiate basketball player himself, he understands the grind and the mental aspect it takes to just keep going in life, whether it's sports, career, family, all of that. And so we've had some wonderful conversations where it's really mental. And if you don't have anything to look forward to, you know, slippery slope, slippery slope.
That's a real testimony, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was really
Sure.
cool to hear that.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
kind of. What do you think the skills? You're kind of talking about how me and you've had those conversations before about the grind and how it carries over, even from sport. I think sports itself teaches you a lot that carries over into life, and I feel like that's why a lot of athletes, that really transition is something like a career like law or something like that have a lot of success because they know the grind, they know how to handle stress, they know all those different aspects of it. Kind of talk about what parts do you see from cycling from a mental standpoint and just, I guess, physical too. What parts of it do you see transitioning from when you were cycling into now being in law school and, progressing in your career?
I think the biggest thing I see is looking back at my career. I tell myself every day, whatever you're about to do today is not going to hurt near as bad as what happened in 2021 XYZ race when you smashed your head in, when you broke your shoulder, when you were riding 60 miles a day in pouring rain, day after day after day with a broken shoulder. You didn't pull out, you didn't give up, you didn't stop. And so kind of just having the ability to pull from my memory of really hard things that I was able to go through makes what I'm going through now a lot more doable. And so that's why I think anyone listening out there that gets into sports, gets into fighting, like control fight, MMA, boxing, jiu-jitsu, any sort of structured sport like that, do it. Do it because there's nothing more humbling than getting beat up by someone else and or crashing on a nasty descent going 65 miles an hour. That stuff will make you respect other people, respect how difficult things are in life. And when you're able to go through those hardships, it really just again gives you another layer to pull from of like, okay, I've been here before. Let's get after it. And that doesn't mean that you have to be an athlete or a professional athlete by any means to go through hard things in life. It can be, things that you went through as a young kid or growing up or, just battling day in and day out and having the consistency to succeed. You'll go places.
That's good.
Alex, I'll have one final question for you, and I think you did an amazing job kind of asking it, or not asking it, but amazing job answering it here. But my final question for you is, what is one thing or one lesson that you would share with anyone from your time cycling or even now in life that you would share a point of wisdom with our audience?
I think, man, there's great question, Emmanuel. I think there's many things I could pull from, but one of the one of the key things that I pull from and that I live to daily is there is always someone better than you. Always. In every way. There's always someone better than you. And when you realize that, you gain a lot of respect for everyone around you. I don't like to live my life acting better than everyone and, I'm too good. I don't deserve to, I'm not going to talk to you. You weren't a pro cyclist. You didn't go through anything like that. No, man, drop the ego. There's always someone better than you. Keep working hard, pursue what you want to pursue, go all in, even to the point of becoming obsessive, and you're going to go places in life.
That's really good. I really like that.
Yes, sir.
I don't think I have too much other questions for you. So you're a 1L in law school right now. How was the first semester?
Oh man, I've definitely had to pull a lot of memories from the back of my head. Uh, Definitely, putting into perspective, it's a lot of work. It's been hard. Like I said, you know you know what we're going through,
For sure.
but it's going to be worth it in the end, and I'm really excited to continue the grind.
Perfect. And then school will start up again in a week or two. I assume it's around January 20th. Definitely, definitely someone I'd want to do business with in the future. Very like-minded person. I feel he's a really hard worker. Me and Alex have
Yeah, I
already
think yeah.
discussed. Me and Alex, we already discussed before. Maybe this could be a future business partner or something.
Hey, you heard it.
We'll
You heard it
see.
here first, man.
You heard it here first on the Easy Convo. This could be a
Hey,
future.
guys.
It's already.
I, I just want to say thank you again. This has been an incredible time. I haven't been on a podcast, been able to share my story. I hope some of the things that I said really resonated with you guys as well as the audience. I really appreciate being called on to this incredible podcast today this morning.
Yeah, we really appreciate you having you on. E, do you have any final last words before I just give our little closing statement?
I appreciate you, Alex, for coming on, man. It was good hearing your story and good learning a lot. Good learning a lot about cycling too.
Yes, sir.
It was
Yes,
an awesome
sir. God
conversation.
bless. Absolutely, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was a really educating experience for us, and I hope it is for everyone listening, really to see the inside of cycling and performing at a pro level. So we really appreciate it. Best of luck to you in law school and all your future endeavors. We hope
Likewise.
this was a easy convo. For everyone listening, this was episode 3. We appreciate you tuning in. If you enjoyed the content like this, make sure you follow and share. Alex, we appreciate you having you on again, and we'll see you guys next time.
Hey, later, boys. Thank you
See
a
you,
lot.
man.